Linda Jones parked her old blue Honda at the far end of the long driveway. The grand Palmer mansion stood tall against the clear blue sky. She checked her watch and hurried toward the staff entrance. It was almost 2 in the afternoon, and Mr. Palmer's guests would arrive at 3. She had to make sure everything was perfect. As she entered through the back door, Betty, the cook, greeted her with a warm smile. "Cutting it close today, aren't you?" Betty said as she chopped vegetables for the fancy finger foods the guests would eat. The school called about Dion. "Nothing bad, just a parent-teacher meeting next week," Linda replied, quickly putting on her black and white uniform. At 28, Linda was younger than most of the house staff, but she worked harder than anyone. "How is that boy of yours doing?" Betty asked. "Growing too fast," Linda said with a smile. "Already in 5th grade and talking about becoming a doctor." Linda had been working at the Palmer estate for 3 months now. The job paid well enough to support her and her 10-year-old son. It also gave her time to attend her night classes at the community college. She was studying international business with a minor in translation studies. Richard Palmer was a tech millionaire who had made his fortune creating software for Wall Street trading. He was not the worst boss Linda had ever had, but he rarely noticed the staff. To him, they were just moving furniture that kept his life running smoothly. Linda grabbed her cleaning cart and headed to the main living room. The room had tall windows that looked out on the garden. Fancy paintings hung on the walls. A huge fireplace stood at one end with leather chairs and sofas arranged around it. Linda quietly dusted the side tables and made sure the flowers were fresh. As she worked, she thought about her parents who had come to America from Haiti when they were very young. They had taught her French and Haitian Creole alongside English. By the time she was 12, she could speak all 3 languages perfectly. Her parents had always told her that education was the key to a better life. Linda had been a star student in high school. She had won a small scholarship to the state university, but during her first year of college, she had gotten pregnant. Her boyfriend left as soon as he found out. Linda had to drop out of school to have her baby and find work. She promised herself she would go back to school one day. 10 years later, she was finally keeping that promise. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock. Mr. Palmer's business guests began to arrive. Linda finished her work in the living room and went to help Betty serve drinks and food. There were 5 men in expensive suits talking loudly about money and business deals. Linda moved quietly around the room, picking up empty glasses and making sure everyone had what they needed. "The Paris deal is almost complete," Mr. Palmer was saying. "We just need to finalize the paperwork by next week." One of the men, a tall guy with gray hair, tried to say something in French. His accent was terrible. Linda had to stop herself from smiling as she heard him butcher the beautiful language. Without thinking, she quietly corrected him under her breath. But the room was quieter than she thought. Everyone heard her. Mr. Palmer turned to look at her with surprise. "What did you say?" he asked. Linda felt her cheeks grow hot. All eyes were on her now. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to interrupt." No, said Mr. Palmer with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Please share your expertise with us." The other men in the room shifted uncomfortably. They could feel something bad was about to happen. "I just meant that the phrase is pronounced differently," Linda said quietly. Mr. Palmer leaned back in his chair. He looked at Linda with cold eyes. Well, our maid thinks she knows French," he said. The other men chuckled nervously. "So you think you're smart? Then translate." He walked over to his desk and pulled out a folder. From it, he took a paper and held it out to Linda. "Translate this for my guests," he said, his voice full of challenge. Linda took the paper with steady hands. She looked down at it and saw it was a legal document written in French. It was about buying a building in Paris. The language was complex with many legal terms that most people wouldn't know. Mr. Palmer clearly expected her to fail. He wanted to embarrass her in front of his rich friends. The men watched her with curious eyes. They were waiting for her to give up, to admit she couldn't do it. The room was so quiet that Linda could hear the clock ticking on the wall. She thought about walking away. She thought about apologizing and going back to her work. But then she remembered her son Dion, who was so proud that his mom was going back to school. She remembered her parents who had worked so hard to give her a good life. They had always told her to stand tall, to never let anyone make her feel small. Linda took a deep breath and began to read the document. The French words flowed easily from her lips. Her accent was perfect, just like her mother had taught her. As she read, she translated each sentence into clear, precise English. The document was about buying a commercial building on a fancy street in Paris. It included details about the price, the condition of the building, and the laws that applied to the sale. There were complicated legal terms that most people wouldn't understand, but Linda knew them from her translation classes. As she spoke, the expressions on the men's faces changed. At first, they looked amused, as if watching a child trying to do something beyond their ability. Then they looked surprised. Finally, they looked impressed. Mr. Palmer's face showed a different journey. First, there was the smugness of someone expecting to win an easy game, then confusion, then disbelief, and finally, something that looked almost like shame. When Linda finished translating the 2-page document, the room was completely silent. No one had expected this, especially not Mr. Palmer. One of the men with kind eyes and silver hair at his temples broke the silence. "That was excellent," he said. "Where did you learn to speak French so well?" Before Linda could answer, Mr. Palmer cut in. "We have work to discuss," he said sharply. "Linda, please bring us more drinks." Linda nodded and left the room. Her heart was beating fast, but she felt a strange mix of fear and pride. She had stood her ground. She had shown them who she really was. But she also knew that standing up to the boss was risky. She needed this job. As she helped Betty prepare more drinks, she wondered what would happen next. Would Mr. Palmer fire her for embarrassing him? Or would this moment pass and be forgotten? What she didn't know was that this small act of courage would change the course of her life forever. And not just hers, but Mr. Palmer's too. That night, Linda couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her small bed, thinking about what had happened at the Palmer mansion. Her tiny apartment was quiet except for the soft snores coming from Dion's room. The boy slept peacefully, unaware of his mother's worries. Linda got up and made herself a cup of tea. She sat by the window and looked out at the streetlights. She wondered if she would still have a job tomorrow. Mr. Palmer had seemed angry when she translated the document perfectly. Men like him didn't like to be shown up, especially not by someone they thought was beneath them. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Betty, the cook at the Palmer house. "You okay, honey?" That was something today. Never seen the boss so shocked. Linda smiled and texted back, "I'm fine. Do you think he'll fire me?" "Don't know. But one of those men, Mr. Bennett, asked about you after you left." Linda frowned. She remembered the kind-eyed man who had complimented her translation. What did he want? She would find out tomorrow, she supposed. She finally fell asleep as the first light of dawn crept through her window. Dion woke her up 2 hours later, excited about a science project at school. "Mom, I need to make a volcano. Can we get the stuff today?" Linda smiled at her son's enthusiasm. "Sure, baby, after school. But now you need to get ready, and I need to go to work. If I still have a job." She dropped Dion off at school and drove to the Palmer estate with a knot in her stomach. When she arrived, Betty met her at the staff entrance with wide eyes. "Girl, you better get to Mr. Palmer's office right away. He's been asking for you since he got up." Linda's heart sank. This was it. She was going to be fired. She took off her coat and straightened her uniform. If she was going to lose her job, she would do it with dignity. She knocked on the door of Mr. Palmer's home office. "Come in," his voice called. Linda entered the room. Mr. Palmer sat behind his large desk. He was not alone. The silver-haired man from yesterday, Mr. Bennett, sat in one of the chairs across from him. "Ah, Linda. Please have a seat," Mr. Palmer said. His tone was different from yesterday, less harsh. Linda sat down nervously, her hands folded in her lap. "I believe I owe you an apology," Mr. Palmer said, surprising her completely. "My behavior yesterday was inexcusable." Linda didn't know what to say. Of all the things she had expected, an apology wasn't one of them. Mr. Bennett spoke up. After you left yesterday, I had a long talk with Richard here. My mother was a housekeeper who put herself through nursing school. I didn't appreciate the way he treated you. Mr. Palmer looked uncomfortable. Carl threatened to pull out of our Paris deal if I didn't make this right. But honestly, I would be apologizing anyway. What I did was wrong. Linda nodded slowly, still unsure where this was going. May I ask where you learned to speak French so well? Mr. Bennett asked. My parents came from Haiti when they were young. We spoke French and Creole at home. I've been bilingual my whole life, Linda explained. And the legal terms? Those aren't common knowledge, Mr. Palmer said. Linda hesitated before answering. I'm taking night classes in international business with a minor in translation studies. We've been studying legal documents this semester. Both men looked impressed. She has a 10-year-old son, too, Mr. Palmer added, surprising Linda that he knew this detail about her life. Betty told me, he explained, seeing her expression. Mr. Bennett smiled. You're a remarkable woman, Linda. Richard and I have been discussing something that might interest you. Linda looked between the two men, confused. Our company is expanding into French-speaking markets, Mr. Palmer explained. We're opening offices in Paris, Montreal, and eventually several cities in West Africa. We need people who understand both, the language and the cultural nuances. People like you, Mr. Bennett added. Linda's heart began to race. Was this going where she thought it was going? We'd like to offer you a position, Mr. Palmer said. Not right away. You should finish your degree first. But we could offer you part-time work in our translation department while you study. Better pay than housekeeping, more flexible hours, and a clear path to a full-time position after graduation. Linda couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why would you do this for me? She asked. I'm not doing it for you, Mr. Palmer replied honestly. I'm doing it for my company. You have skills we need. Yesterday I saw you as just a maid. Today I see you as Linda Jones, a talented linguist who could help my business grow. Mr. Bennett nodded. Talent can be found in unexpected places. My mother taught me that. Linda felt tears stinging her eyes but held them back. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down. There's one more thing, Mr. Palmer said. My wife runs a foundation that offers scholarships to single parents. I've taken the liberty of submitting your name. If you're accepted, your tuition and books will be covered for the remainder of your degree. Now Linda couldn't hold back her tears. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mr. Bennett said kindly. Yes, Linda whispered. Yes to all of it. That evening, Linda picked up Dion from school with a light heart. They went to the store and bought supplies for his volcano project. As they walked through the aisles, Linda told her son about the changes coming to their lives. Does this mean you won't be cleaning houses anymore? Dion asked as he carefully selected red food coloring for his lava. Not for much longer, Linda said. I'll be working in an office using my languages to help companies talk to each other. Like a translator? Dion's eyes widened. That's cool, Mom. And the best part is, I'll have more time to help with your homework and come to your school events. Dion grinned. And more money for cool stuff? Linda laughed. Some cool stuff, but most of it goes to savings for your college. Fair enough, Dion said with a shrug. At home, they spread newspaper on the kitchen table and began building the volcano. As they worked, Linda thought about how quickly life could change. Yesterday, she had been a maid being mocked by her wealthy boss. Today, she had a new career path opening before her. Mom, you're daydreaming again, Dion said, waving his hand in front of her face. Sorry, baby. Just thinking about how sometimes good things come from bad situations. Like when I broke my arm last year but got to meet that cool doctor who showed me all the x-ray stuff, Dion asked. Exactly like that, Linda said, ruffling his hair. As they finished the volcano, Linda's phone buzzed with a text from Betty. Heard the news. So proud of you, girl. You showed them what you're made of. Linda smiled. She had always known she was capable of more than cleaning houses. Now others knew it too. But she also knew this was just the beginning of her journey. There would be challenges ahead. Finishing her degree, learning the business world, balancing work and motherhood. But for the first time in a long time, Linda Jones felt like the future was bright with possibility. And it had all started because she couldn't keep quiet when someone butchered her mother tongue. 2 months had passed since the day Linda translated the French document. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined. She now worked 3 days a week in the translation department at Palmer Industries while continuing her studies. The pay was twice what she had earned as a housekeeper, and the work used her real talents. It was Monday morning, and Linda sat at her new desk in the company's glass office building downtown. She wore a simple navy blue dress instead of a maid's uniform. Family photos of Dion sat next to her computer. She was translating marketing materials for the company's new office in Montreal. Susan, her supervisor, stopped by her desk. "How's it going with the brochures?" "Almost done," Linda replied. "There are a few idioms that don't translate directly, so I'm working on alternatives that keep the same feeling." Susan nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Mr. Palmer wants to see the final versions by Wednesday." Linda still found it strange to hear people talk about Mr. Palmer as her boss, rather than the man whose floors she used to clean. She hadn't seen much of him since starting her new position. He worked on a different floor and traveled often. At noon, Linda gathered her things to leave. She had classes on Monday afternoons. As she waited for the elevator, the doors opened to reveal Mr. Palmer himself. "Linda," he said with surprise. "Heading to class?" "Yes, sir," she replied, stepping into the elevator with him. "How are you finding the work?" he asked as the elevator descended. "It's challenging but rewarding," Linda said honestly. "I'm learning a lot." Mr. Palmer nodded. "Susan speaks highly of your work. She says you catch nuances that our software translations miss." Linda smiled. "Human languages are complex. Machines don't understand context the way people do. That's exactly why we need people like you," Mr. Palmer said. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Do you have a moment before your class?" Linda checked her watch. "A short one, yes." They walked to a small cafe in the lobby of the building. Mr. Palmer bought them both coffee, and they sat at a corner table. "We're moving forward with our West African expansion faster than expected," he explained. "Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Cameroon first, then possibly more countries later. All former French colonies with French as an official language." Linda nodded, interested but unsure why he was telling her this. "The thing is," Mr. Palmer continued, "speaking the language isn't enough. We need people who understand the cultural differences, the business practices, the way relationships work in these places." "That makes sense," Linda agreed. "Your professors tell me you're doing excellent work in your international business courses," Mr. Palmer said. Linda was surprised. "You've spoken to my professors?" Mr. Palmer looked slightly embarrassed. "The Scholarship Foundation keeps track of recipients' progress. Your name keeps coming up in the reports." Linda didn't know whether to feel flattered or watched. "I'm working hard," she said simply. "Here's what I'm proposing," Mr. Palmer said, leaning forward. "We want to send a small team to visit these countries next summer to establish relationships and learn more about the local business environments. I'd like you to be part of that team." Linda nearly spilled her coffee. "Me? But I'm just an intern. I haven't even finished my degree. By next summer, you'll have completed most of your coursework, and you bring something valuable to the team." The perspective of someone who understands both worlds, Linda thought about what this could mean for her career. International travel, real business experience, connections in multiple countries. But then she thought of Dion. "I have my son to consider," she said. "I can't leave him for an extended period." Mr. Palmer nodded. "I thought you might say that. The trips would be 2 weeks at a time with breaks in between, and we could arrange for your son to join you for part of the time. Educational experience for him and valuable family time for you." Linda was speechless. This level of accommodation was beyond anything she had expected. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked finally. Mr. Palmer was quiet for a moment. "Do you know what Carl Bennett said to me after you left my office that day?" he said. "You almost threw away a diamond because you couldn't see past its setting." He was right. I've spent my career looking for talent in the same places everyone else does. Ivy League schools, competitor companies, industry conferences. I never thought to look right under my nose. He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. Now I'm wondering how many other diamonds I've overlooked. So yes, I'm helping you, but you're also helping change how I think about talent and opportunity. Linda nodded slowly. I'll need to think about the travel opportunity and discuss it with Dion. Of course, Mr. Palmer said. Take your time. That evening, Linda picked up Dion from his after-school program. They walked to their favorite diner for dinner, a treat they allowed themselves once a week now that Linda's finances had improved. Guess what, Mom? Dion said excitedly as they slid into a booth. My science teacher chose my paper to be entered in the district competition. That's wonderful. Linda beamed with pride. The one about solar energy? Yep, Dion grinned. If it wins, I get to go to the state science fair in the spring. Linda watched her son's animated face as he described his project. At 10 years old, he was already showing the same love of learning that she had at his age. She thought about Mr. Palmer's offer and what it could mean for both their futures. Dion, how would you feel about traveling to Africa next summer? She asked. Dion's eyes widened. For real, like actual Africa? Linda laughed. Yes, actual Africa. Several countries where they speak French like Senegal and Ivory Coast. Would I get to go on a safari? Dion asked immediately. I'm not sure. These are work trips for me. But I'm sure we could arrange some special activities for you. Dion considered. This seriously? Would I miss school? No, it would be during summer break. And it would be educational. You'd learn about different cultures, see historical sites, maybe practice your French. Dion had been taking French classes since he was 6. He wasn't fluent like his mother, but he could carry on basic conversations. Think it sounds awesome, he decided. But what about Grandma? Who would take care of her while we're gone? Linda's mother had been having health problems lately. She lived in a senior apartment complex nearby, and Linda checked on her regularly. That's a good question, Linda said, touched by her son's thoughtfulness. We'd need to make arrangements for Grandma. Maybe Aunt Kelly could help. They continued, discussing the possibility over burgers and fries. By the time they finished their meal, Linda had a list of questions to ask Mr. Palmer about the proposed trips. As they walked home in the cool evening air, Linda thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 months. From cleaning houses to planning international business trips, all because she had spoken up in a room where she was expected to be invisible. Penny for your thoughts, Mom, Dion said, squeezing her hand. I was just thinking about how one moment can change everything, Linda replied. If I hadn't corrected that man's French, I'd still be dusting Mr. Palmer's bookshelves. I'm glad you did, Dion said. You always tell me to speak up when I know something. Linda smiled down at her son. Yes, I do. And now I need to take my own advice more often. They reached their apartment building just as the streetlights came on. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Linda felt ready to face them. Step by step, word by word, she was building a better future for herself and her son. 6 months later, Linda stood at the window of her new apartment watching the sunset. It was bigger than their old place, with 2 bedrooms and a small study where she could work and study. They had moved in 3 months ago after Linda received her first bonus from Palmer Industries. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Richard Palmer himself. Team meeting tomorrow at 9. Big news about the African expansion. Can you be there? Linda texted back a quick yes and put her phone down. She still found it strange that the man who once expected her to clean his house now asked for her input in business meetings. Life had changed so much, so quickly. In the living room, Dion was video chatting with his grandmother on the laptop. Linda's mother had moved to a better senior living facility thanks to Linda's improved finances. And then my science project won 2nd place in the district, Dion was saying excitedly. Mom says we can put the medal in a frame. Linda smiled as she listened. Dion had thrived these past months. With Linda working better hours and earning more money, she could be more present in his life. His grades had improved, and he had joined the science club at school. When Dion finished his call, Linda sat beside him on the couch. Homework done? She asked. All done, Dion replied. Are we still going to buy new clothes this weekend for the trip? Linda nodded. The Africa trip was now just 2 months away. Dion would join her for the Senegal portion, while her sister Kelly would stay with him during the Ivory Coast and Cameroon visits. Yes, we need to get you some lightweight clothes. It's going to be hot there in July. Dion grinned. I still can't believe we're really going to Africa. None of my friends have ever been. It's a work trip, Linda reminded him. I'll be in meetings a lot of the time, but we'll still see cool stuff, right? You promised we'd visit Gorée Island. Yes, we will, Linda assured him. Gorée Island was a historical site in Senegal, a place where enslaved people had once been held before being shipped across the Atlantic. Linda wanted Dion to understand this part of their heritage. And you'll get to practice your French with real French speakers, she added. Dion made a face. My French isn't as good as yours. It will get better with practice, Linda said. And many people there also speak Wolof and other local languages. Maybe you can learn a few words of those. 2. The next morning, Linda dropped Dion at school and drove to the Palmer Industries office building. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress with a white blazer. Her hair was styled in neat braids pulled back from her face. She looked professional and confident. In the meeting room, she found Richard Palmer, Carl Bennett, and 5 other team members waiting. There was a large map of West Africa displayed on the screen at the front of the room. Ah, Linda, good, Richard said as she entered. We can begin. Linda took a seat and opened her notebook. Over the past months, she had proven her value to the company many times over. Her translations were accurate and culturally sensitive. Her insights into international business practices had helped the company avoid several potential missteps. I have news about our African expansion, Richard announced. The Senegal office will open 1 month earlier than planned. Construction is finished and the local authorities have expedited our permits. There were murmurs around the table. This was a big development. This means we need to accelerate our timeline, Richard continued. Linda, can your trip be moved up to next month? Instead of July? Linda's heart sank. Next month was May. Dion would still be in school. Sir, as you know, my son was planning to accompany me to Senegal in July during his school break. Richard nodded. I remember. This is a challenge, I understand. Carl Bennett spoke up. What if we split the trip? Linda goes to Senegal next month for the office opening, then returns in July with her son for the cultural exchange program we discussed. Linda considered this. That could work. I'd need to arrange care for Dion during my May trip, but it's doable. Excellent, Richard said. Now, there's another matter to discuss. Our partners in Senegal have requested that we send someone to stay for 3 months to train their staff and help establish operations. Everyone looked at Linda. She was the obvious choice with her language skills and cultural knowledge. I can't be away from my son for 3 months, Linda said firmly. Richard nodded. We know that. That's why we're proposing something different. We'd like you to head the Senegal office permanently, Linda. You and Dion would relocate there. The room fell silent. Linda stared at Richard in shock. Permanently? Move to Senegal? For 2 years initially, Richard clarified. With a substantial increase in salary, housing provided, and an international school for Dion. After 2 years, you could return to the States or possibly move to another international office if you prefer. Linda's mind was racing. Move to Africa? It was a huge opportunity career-wise. But what about Dion's life here? His friends, his school, his routine? I would need time to consider this, she said carefully. It's a major life change for both of us. Of course, Richard said. Take a week to think it over. Discuss it with your son. We need an answer by next Friday. After the meeting, Linda sat alone in her office, trying to process the offer. A leadership position in an international office. It was beyond anything she had imagined when she started this job, beyond anything she had dreamed when she was cleaning houses and taking night classes. At lunchtime, Carl Bennett knocked on her door. Got a minute? He asked. Linda nodded, and he sat down across from her. That was quite a bombshell, Richard. Dropped this morning. Carl said. Yes, it was, Linda agreed. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Carl smiled kindly. You know, when my mother was studying nursing, she was offered a chance to work in a hospital in Germany for a year. It was a prestigious program, but she had me to think about. I was about your son's age. What did she do? Linda asked. She took me with her, Carl said. It was the best year of my childhood. I learned a new language, made friends from all over the world, saw places most kids never get to see. It changed how I saw everything. Linda considered this. But weren't you scared? Didn't you miss your friends? Sure, at first, Carl admitted. But kids adapt quickly, and now 50 years later, I still have friends from that time. One of them is our company's European legal advisor. He stood to leave. Just something to think about. Opportunities like this don't come along often. That evening, Linda picked up Dion and took him for ice cream. As they sat in the park with their cones, she carefully brought up the subject. Dion, what would you think about living in Senegal for a while? Not just visiting, but actually living there. Dion looked at her with wide eyes. Live in Africa? For how long? 2 years, Linda said. You'd go to an international school with him? Kids from all over the world. We'd have a nice house. You could learn new languages, see amazing places. Dion was quiet for a long time, thinking. Would we come back to visit Grandma and Aunt Kelly? Yes, absolutely, Linda assured him. Twice a year at least. Could I bring my Xbox? Linda laughed. Yes, you could bring your Xbox. Dion took another lick of his ice cream. I think it sounds cool. Scary, but cool. Linda hugged her son close. That's exactly how I feel about it too. 1 year later, Linda stood on the balcony of her home in Dakar, Senegal. The sun was setting over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Below her, the streets were busy with people heading home after work. The sounds of car horns, music, and voices speaking Wolof and French drifted up to her. Inside, Dion was video chatting with his friends back in America. At 11 years old, he had adapted to life in Africa better than Linda had expected. He attended an international school where he had made friends from all over the world. His French was now almost as good as Linda's, and he was learning Wolof too. Linda sipped her tea and thought about how much had changed in the past 2 years. From cleaning the Palmer mansion to running the Senegal office of Palmer Industries. It seemed like a dream sometimes. Her phone rang. It was Richard Palmer calling from New York. Linda, how are things in Dakar? He asked when she answered. Busy, but good, she replied. We just signed the contract with the French shipping company I told you about last week. Excellent, Richard said. That's actually why I'm calling. The board is very impressed with how you've grown the African operations. Revenue is up 30% in just 1 year. Linda smiled. The success of the Senegal office had been a team effort, but she was proud of her leadership. I'm calling because I'll be in Dakar next week with Carl Bennett and some other executives. Richard continued. We're planning the next phase of our African expansion, and we want your input. I'll make sure everything is ready for your visit, Linda said. After the call, Linda went inside to check on Dion. He was now doing homework at the dining table, his textbooks spread out around him. Was that Mr. Palmer? Dion asked. He had met Richard several times during the past year, and had even started calling him Uncle Rich after Richard brought him a telescope for his birthday. Yes, he's coming to visit next week with Mr. Bennett and some other people from the company, Linda replied. Cool. Can we take them to that restaurant with the really good fish? Linda laughed. Maybe. We'll see. The following week, Linda stood at the airport waiting for Richard and his team to arrive. She wore a beautiful dress made of local fabric, bright blues and yellows that complemented her dark skin. It was one of many she had bought since moving to Senegal, embracing the local fashion. Richard, Carl, and 3 other executives emerged from the arrivals gate. They looked tired after the long flight, but smiled when they saw Linda. Welcome to Dakar, Linda said, greeting them warmly. It's good to see you, Richard replied. You look like you belong here. As they drove from the airport to the hotel, Linda pointed out landmarks and explained local customs. The executives asked questions about the city and the business environment. Linda answered confidently, drawing on her year of experience living and working in Senegal. "We have meetings scheduled for tomorrow morning at the office," Linda explained. "Then lunch with our local partners. In the evening, I'd like to invite you all to my home for dinner." "Sounds perfect," Carl said. "I'm looking forward to seeing Dion again." The next day, Linda led the meetings at the Palmer Industries office in downtown Dakar. She presented her plans for expanding into neighboring countries and improving their supply chain across West Africa. The executives asked tough questions, but Linda had done her homework. She had numbers, projections, and strategies ready. During a break, Richard pulled Linda aside. "I'm impressed," he said. "You've really grown into this role." Linda smiled. "Thank you. It's been challenging but rewarding." "That's actually something I want to discuss with you," Richard said. "But let's wait until dinner tonight." That evening, Linda welcomed the executives to her home. It was a spacious house with a garden, provided by the company. Dion proudly showed Carl his room, decorated with a mix of American and Senegalese items. Linda had prepared a feast with the help of her neighbor Mariam, who had taught her to cook local dishes. They ate on the terrace, enjoying fish yassa, jollof rice, and other West African specialties. After dinner, when Dion had gone to bed, Richard cleared his throat. "Linda, we've been discussing the future of Palmer Industries' international operations," he said. Linda nodded, curious about where this was going. "The success you've had here in Senegal has exceeded all our expectations," Richard continued. "You've shown an exceptional ability to bridge cultures and grow business in new markets." "Thank you," Linda said. "It's been a team effort." "But you've been the leader," Carl pointed out. "That's why we want to offer you a new position." Linda looked at them questioningly. "We're creating a new role," Richard explained. "Director of International Expansion. You would oversee all our operations in emerging markets, not just Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe." Linda's eyes widened. "That's a huge responsibility." "It is," Richard agreed. "But we believe you're the right person for it. You would be based in New York with regular travel to our international offices." "New York?" Linda repeated. "Move back to the States?" Richard nodded. "We need you at headquarters for this role. It comes with a substantial salary increase, of course, and we'd help Dion get into an excellent school in New York." Linda's mind was racing. This was an incredible opportunity, a senior executive position, but she and Dion had built a life here in Senegal. They had friends, routines, a sense of belonging. "I'll need time to think about this," she said, "and to discuss it with Dion." "Of course," Richard said. "Take all the time you need." The next morning, Linda took Dion to his favorite beach before school. They walked along the shore as the sun rose, collecting shells. "Dion, how would you feel about moving back to America?" Linda asked. "To New York City?" Dion looked up at her in surprise. "Leave Senegal? But I like it here. I have friends here." "I know," Linda said. "I like it here too. But Mr. Palmer has offered me an important job in New York. I would be in charge of the company's business in many countries." Dion kicked at the sand. "Would we ever come back to visit?" "Yes, definitely," Linda assured him. "I would still work with the office here." Dion was quiet for a while, thinking. "Would the new job make you happy, Mom?" he finally asked. Linda considered the question. "I think it would be challenging and rewarding. But our happiness is about more than just my job. It's about our home, our friends, the life we build together. We could build a new life in New York," Dion suggested. "Like we did here." Linda smiled at her son's wisdom. "Yes, we could." "Then I think you should take the job," Dion said. "You always tell me to be brave and try new things." Linda hugged him close. "When did you get so smart?" Dion grinned. "I learned from watching you." 2 weeks later, Linda sat in Richard Palmer's office in New York. She had just signed the contract for her new position. Richard looked at her from across his desk, the same desk where he had once apologized to her for mocking her when she was a maid. Welcome to the executive team, Director Jones, he said, extending his hand. Linda shook it firmly. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Palmer. Richard, please, he said with a smile. We're colleagues now. As Linda left his office, she thought about the strange path that had brought her here. From cleaning houses to running international operations for a major corporation. From being mocked for speaking French to being valued for her languages and cultural understanding. All because she had spoken up that day in the Palmer mansion when a millionaire had chuckled at a black maid and said, "So you think you're smart? Then translate." Sometimes, Linda thought, the moments that seem to be our lowest can actually be the beginning of our rise. The key is to stand tall, know your worth, and never be afraid to show what you know.